Security Weekly is brought to you by NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with a proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email them at contact@netsparker.com. ProXPN is the leading VPN service offering free accounts, excellent premium features, and an outstanding commitment to privacy and security online. Use the discount code WEEKLY and save 50% off for life. Tenable Network Security, creators of Nessus, the world's best vulnerability scanner. Jumpstart your security program today and evaluate Security Center CV, the continuous monitoring solution. For more information, visit them on the web at tenable.com. Overwhelmed when it comes time to choose which cigar to smoke? Confused by the differences between 60 ring gauge, Robusto, Corona, and Lancero? Do you yearn to try all the new cigars on the market, but need a guide to tell you where to start? Look no further than the Stogie Geek Show! Hosted by yours truly and Will Cooper, we've made it our mission to educate both new and experienced cigar smokers. Tune in for interviews with leaders in the cigar industry, how-to segments, and weekly cigar reviews. Visit StogieGeeks.com to subscribe to our podcast, watch the live show, and discover our video archives. Stogie Geeks, geeks kicking ash. Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. God, I almost said Stogie Geeks. I got to be careful with that commercial running now. It's wonderful to be here talking about the security news for this week. Lots of good stuff to talk about. What do we know about this new Drown vulnerability thing?
Oh, that's a good one.
Kick us off.
Yeah, so Drown is an interesting thing. It's basically a facet of having SSL v2 still enabled in the libraries, the OpenSSL libraries. But surprisingly, it's to my understanding, is it's not a downgrade attack. It's vulnerable just purely by the code being there. So it's kind of a complex entity. But the impact, from my reading, is complete decryption of the traffic, which is obviously a bad thing. So
it's an Oracle attack.
It's an Oracle attack. Why is it? Is it specific to Oracle?
No, but by Oracle is that you need a specific number of connections before you're able to tell and try by brute forcing the connection itself. So what you're actually doing is brute forcing the encryption in a way that is already pre-known, pre-computed, pre-hashed. So you're able kind of to determine how to attack the TLS sessions. You need around 1,000 TLS sessions before you're able to decrypt one of those. And that one that you decrypt, you'll have to check if it has the data that you want. Mm-hmm. So you need to kind of collect a bunch of connections, and it has to be server-side, because on the client side, you actually all client applications in terms of web browsers and those that use a framework like .NET or something similar, or WebKit, will actually do HTTPS caching to kind of accelerate the handshake for when you're doing those connections. So it's mostly server-side. As Josh mentioned, it has to be SSL v2, which nobody is supposed to be using anymore. That is something that came out in 1995, and in 1996 it was declared obsolete.
Yeah.
In 1 year it was declared obsolete. But yeah, some people for some reason are kind of stupid and still go from tutorials that they found in the web on how to. They say, no, enable this for, you don't know if you're if a very old client is going to be connecting. Yeah, they're still using Netscape, probably. But yeah, some people actually have it. If there's another way of attacking it, that people are going like, where it can actually move over to your SSL v3 connection, and that is that you're using the same private key for that server, which will allow you to capture even more traffic, that then you can try to determine that key and be able to get into the clear text of the connection itself, kind of brute force it. I mentioned brute force just as a way of simplifying it. An Oracle attack is a bit more complicated than that. Um, what happens many times is that people are using VMs, they're using containers, they're using other types of methods of deployment, and what they're doing is they're kind of packaging the same server certificate with their VMs, with their host, which actually kind of amplifies this type of
I
attack.
see.
So yeah, it has a nice name. It's not it has a nice ring to it,
It's got a theme song.
but
It's got
it's
a
not
A
a
theme
logo.
hard.
song. It's got a
Well,
logo.
if it's called Drown, isn't the theme song going to be like, ah?
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's a heartbleed. It's not a heartbleed kind of thing.
No.
First of all, you need to intercept the traffic. Most of the traffic that you want is for the server, so you're going to have to be in that co-location. You're going to need to be in that data center. You're going to to be into that server room or wiring closet and be able to kind of capture that traffic, because that's the traffic you want. You don't want to capture the traffic of Joe Smo or from myself, because you need, as I mentioned, over 1,000 connections, and you need to collect as many as possible. And you're only going to be targeting me for one single specific server, so it's better just to attack the server itself. So right now, just by that, your attacker pool just greatly diminishes. So it has to be somebody that wants to get into that specific company, is able to capture a lot of traffic that goes to that specific company, to that specific web server, to a specific service that you want to actually attack. So yeah, it's as I mentioned, it has a very nice name. It's very cool.
So on a risk catnip scale, this one's kind of high.
Yeah, it's a lot of people say no, but they can decrypt your TLS connect. Yeah, if I'm targeted by the NSA, if I'm targeted by the Chinese specifically because they want to get into my system, they want access to a specific server. It has to be an attacker with a lot of capabilities in my mind to go after you. Or you have to be a company that really pissed off somebody hard enough that they're going and tapping somewhere with a
Well,
high.
yeah, in which case they have a whole bunch of things that they're going to bring
Yeah,
against.
yeah. Maybe not necessarily this one, right?
Yeah, and there were additionally two other vulnerabilities in that came out for OpenSSL at the same time. One of them was a denial of service. The other one, it had to be specific. I think was it Skylake Intel CPUs or something like that. It was for specific Intel CPU on the cache, and you had to do a timing attack to be able to kind of get some of the ciphertext, but not all of it. And when you look at it, it's for specific Intel CPUs, so you need to know what they're running. They need to have something specifically enabled. I didn't read that one that much because after glancing over it, I went like, nah, this is bullshit. And I just kind of skipped the advisory on that one.
I think that's a really good assessment of this vulnerability.
Yep.
I want to change gears and talk about an article that I flagged that said there's over 700 million records breached in 2015. And
A lot of them are repeated.
yeah, well, my question for the panel, right, as I look at ways to talk about how bad things are, what's the problem? The problem that I have with the way we define the problem is we somewhat define the problem like all the same. So in almost every, sales presentation or every website insecurity, or we all seem to come back to this theme where, and I know that all of you on the panel, who are hosts on the show, and a lot of you listening, right, you've seen the presentation where it goes, things are bad, right? Because that's part of, and Michael, the pitch information that you sent me last week was just, I took that to heart. It's freaking awesome stuff, right? Cool. But I'm relating this to security, and I'm like, well, the way that I've seen most people define the problem is they put up a slide, and it's got all the logos of all the companies that have had major breaches, right?
Right.
And I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, well, now I kind of understand why people are putting that slide up, right? Because they're trying to define, like, well, this is the problem, and we have a solution to help you with this problem. But I felt really uncomfortable doing that. I'm like, this is how everyone else is doing it, and I don't feel like just
what's
because
interesting?
this handful
Yeah.
of companies have had a major data breach, does that mean like is that a defining moment for us to say that we have problems in security?
Well, so I got three things to point out, and then I know everybody else has got their ideas too. So the first of which that kind of popped into my head is I had to have said it here before. If everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority, and that's one of my big challenges. Is that after these any one of these records that got breached, people come out and they go, "Well, I told them everything they needed to do." Yeah, there's a list of 100 things long, and it was going to cost millions of dollars to
Right.
do, and it probably wasn't worth it. But I told them. Yeah, look, well, so if everything's breached, then nothing's breached, which actually kind of brings me around to my second point. And my second point is I don't think. Look, I know I wrote the book Into
You
the
did.
Breach, and when
Literally
I wrote
wrote
the
the
book
book.
Into the Breach, I looked at it, but what's interesting is I went back and I do from time to time skim through parts of it, and I wrote a phrasing in there that basically said a breach is a symptom. Like stop worrying. Like the breach isn't your problem. Your breach is a symptom of something else. And a number of years later, the more I look at it, you're going to get breached. Things are going to happen in life. As prepared as you think you aren't. So the question now moves to one of rapid detection and appropriate response. And we're going to spin a little bit, but then let's go back to your last point. I'm getting to the point like when I get pitched and people are like, "Well, did you see the?" And I know Jack's not here to fire him up. But did you see the latest Ponemon stat, the cost of a breach? And I always let him. I don't even let him finish anymore. I used to, but now I just cut him off and I go, "Is the whole return on investment calibrated off of some $6 million arbitrary number?" And you hear this pause, and I go, "Right, okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take that number, throw it out. Now prove to me you've got value." And they're like, "Well, but like everybody's getting breached." I don't know if you saw this. This was
Not
the third point I
everyone though. That's the issue I
Well-
take with it, right?
Look, I agree with you, but even of the big names that did, Brandon Williams does research on this. What I love about Brandon's approach is he partnered up with Mac, so they actually looked at like underlying data of like people who go back and shop at the stores, right? Because we love to tout these perception surveys that come out, and somebody says, "Paul, that really bad company breached your information," and that could have been. It was credit card theft, but I mean, it could have compromised your identity and your children. Are you ever going to shop there again? And you're like, hell no, no. Yeah, no. It turns out you actually are.
You do.
And so what happens was he started looking at the behavior of it all, and it turns out, and this surprised him. Even like the big breaches. I mean, obviously, Home Depot got dragged through the mud. Target got dragged through the mud. People don't pay attention. They don't. There's so much, and we call it breach fatigue. But it's like, yeah, look. Now, where I think is interesting, and I'd actually be curious what you guys all think of this. I'm kind of starting to come around. I bristle now. Like I've always bristled when people suggest that people are the weakest link, and they always are, and they don't understand. That's that. Look around. Look at the beauty in the world around us, and all these things we've created. People get it. Maybe we're hyper focused on a set of risks. That's why I call it risk catnip. That the rest of the world looked at and went, "Yeah, okay, we good. What else you guys got for me?" And so it's now that doesn't make us right or wrong. It doesn't make them right or wrong. It just means that there's probably some middle ground, and we'd be wise to move toward it a little quicker, I think. Or we're all going to drown. See what I did there? That was
I like how you brought you tie. That was very good.
I'm trying. It was not good though.
Carlos, Joff, what do you think about basically like validating what we do in security based on these handful of companies that got breached?
Yeah, well, you just said it the right way. The first problem I have is the way the title of the article reads: over 700 million breached records. Right? That could have been one company.
OPM, baby.
Yeah. So to actually put the title of the article for starters out there in such a way is very, very misleading. And I take exception to that. But yeah, that's sensationalism. So okay, I get it at some point. The risk catnip thing, I just want to address that. To me, and sort of responding to Michael here on this, I don't think if the exec level and the consumers and the customers and all of the people that are not in our industry and not hyper focused on what we do, if their response to our warnings is just, "Hey, whatever, so what, move on," then we're not doing our jobs well enough, in my opinion. We're not explaining it well enough.
You know what's interesting? Let me just amplify that because it's been that way for 15 years now. After 9/11 and the buildings had come down, there was a company, and I don't remember what it was. I can try to find the site, but the bottom line was the security manager had begged the board for like 2 years to not have the backups in the other tower, and they never listened to him. Well, both towers come down, and he goes back in all smug, like told you so, and they fired him. And he said, "What the hell? I told you." They said, "No, no, you didn't convince us.
Right.
Your
That
job is to
that's
convince us."
that's exactly it. That amplifies it. So, and this also
Yeah, I got you back, bro.
draws back to something that we do with on a daily basis at Black Hills, and that is, there's a section on every report that you'll get from a pen tester company, from any company that's doing a consulting engagement, and the section's going to read something like executive summary, and it's going to have some form of strategic guidance in it. And 9 times out of 10, we're not doing a good enough job, and I'm throwing us under the bus for a minute here, in properly crafting that strategic guidance and moving it away from tactical guidance. We've got to move towards talking the language of the business and crossing that bridge and making that connection to what matters to that company. And if it's tactical guidance that's talking about the technologies, that's not what matters to the company. So that's I think where all of us in the industry, not just any one particular company, is falling down. I think we're not crossing that bridge appropriately. Does
Mm.
that sound profound?
No,
I
it
was
does.
I was
You know,
pondering that, John. It was so profound. I had to
and
digest
so
it.
and so here's the good news. People are ready for it. You know,
They
it
are.
it
They are. There's been enough publicity and enough headlines that people are actually, I think, hungry for some of us, especially those of us who are more visible in the industry, to actually, cross that divide and start explaining these risks and connecting those dots. And I think it speaks well to the kinds of things that you do, Michael, of connecting those dots for people and bringing some reality to those tactical and technical kinds of risks that most of us in the industry are focused on pointing out.
Yep, I call it field of view. We have a field of view, and we get deep in the risk. And there's a lot of people who go to Vegas to risk to win, right? So they see the upside of the risk. Our careers, and perhaps the way we're wired, is to look at the downside of risk,
Hmm.
which means everything we do, we're always looking at the negative, always looking for why it's not going to work, why you need to know about it, right? All that type of stuff. And what's kind of fascinating about that is that sometimes we inappropriately substitute our field of view as the full picture. And what we need more of is coming together with somebody and say, "Hey, help me understand. I'll share what I know. You share what you know. We'll figure out the right solution."
Go ahead,
I have
Carlos.
a question. When you guys say people are ready, what people? Because right now we're talking about records that is a subset of the industry out there in terms that manages information for people. And still there's going to be a subset of those who actually are going to have PNI that they have to protect personal information that they'll have to protect from people, and that they may have an impact if those records get compromised. So that is an even lower number or a fraction of that set. So when I see what you guys are saying versus the article, I'm only seeing one fraction of the big industry out there that probably is going to be willing to go through the effort, or or that not only do they have the money, but they also have the impetus to actually do it. They have the motivation to do it. So I think the article just put a nice headline to get attention, to get clicks. Probably they have ads in it, and
Yeah, and it's loaded with traditional snark, and we're smart and everybody's stupid, and
yeah,
same
I,
crap. That
I see that. Yes, we're moving, but we're still moving at its slow pace. We're moving gradually.
Not even at a medium pace. We're at a slow pace.
Yeah, and
and you want ludicrous speed. I get it.
Yes.
no,
Yeah.
I don't
Not
want
even
to
Lucas. Yeah. Go ahead,
because
Carlos.
Ludicrous speed. Go.
it's like what happened with the iPhone. But it kind of reminds me of one of the things I was looking at Congress about the iPhone, Apple, AT&T, and all of these companies. Somebody actually mentioned, hey, let's not do legislation right now while we're in a panic or we're running scared because we're gonna fuck it up. in other words. And
Yeah, history proves that.
when it comes to the industry, I'm seeing, hey, PCI has improved gradually. Companies are improving gradually. We saw 2 weeks ago that now router companies are getting pummeled by the FCC because they're not providing a good way to update and secure their devices, and they get now branded like you cannot say this is by secure. You got breached. You were not doing it properly. So finally, we're starting to see some stuff happening, some legislation, some rules, some actual precedents where stuff even in IoT is getting addressed. So I'm happy to see that. I just want to see it move in a way that we're actually thinking about it and not doing a knee-jerk reaction to it.
Well,
So
right, and I think it's the key, right? I mean, look, I don't hide it anymore, right? I'm not a big fan of government regulation for this stuff. Oddly enough, I'm not against the courts deciding it because I think the courts move more deliberately and they have to, and you get to air it out and test it and validate it. Legislation and stuff forcing it. I mean, anytime you're going to drop a ban hammer on somebody, you're going to create artificial incentives. It's like there's this fallacy of controls that the controls are going to solve the problem. That only works if you define the problem properly. So the stuff you just said, which I agree with, the part I like the best is to say, I'd like us. This is the thing. We don't have to stop. I'd like to just make sure that every now and then we circle back and say, okay, but what's the problem we're trying to solve? And then whatever people blurt out, go cool. But what's the problem we're trying to solve? Like you can do it like a dick, I guess. But the point is to say, but what do we need to solve? Where does that go? It's like PCI. When PCI was the digital dozen, I liked it. I thought that was pretty solid. How many freaking questions is it now? I feel like it's gotten a little bit unwieldy. Like if we're going to try to checklist security for everything, we're missing out on the opportunities to it. But there was, it's funny, Paul. I almost sent this to you, but I could have sent it to the whole team. There was a thing out this week. I can't pronounce it, but there's some new router out. Automatically meshes, automatically secures itself, and the idea is you can throw a bunch of them around your house. They'll link themselves up, and everybody's raving about them. And it says, look, is it as fancy? No. Is it as high tech? No. Do you have as much control over it? No. Was that our goal? No. Does it auto update? Yeah. So we're getting these things in there, and this is where I keep coming back to. And I say, we have these vibrant startup communities. Are we talking with them? Are we giving them resources? Are we teaching them how to think about this stuff, the questions to ask, and are we confusing and overwhelming everybody? Right? Is it turned into a melee, or are we actually saying, hey, there's three things. If you're in an IoT environment today, and here's three questions you need to ask, and here's what you're going to do with it, then we're advancing that conversation, and that's the thing. So when I say people are ready for it, here's the thing: when I go talk to startups about that, frankly, most of them say we hadn't thought about that, but then they do, and they have a lot more questions, and I learn from them. I think far more than they learn from me and the people I can connect them to. When I
So,
go out to talk to executives, they feel the same way.
so I want to make one comment though, just kind of dialing back to a little bit what Carlos said. One of the things that really concerns me about the state of the industry right now and the state of the publicity around these breaches is that if we, as an industry, don't make some concerted directions to solve some of the bigger problems together with our IT providers, our IT partners, um, I think you will get legislation that's poorly crafted, and I think that's the worst result.
Oh, no, I
Um,
agree. But would you agree then too that this obsessive focus on the breach is the worst thing in the world? Dragging Target
well,
before
yeah, yes,
Congress? I mean, what was that?
because the result of the excessive publicity is to promote fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which in turn gets the average citizen who knows nothing about what IT even does, yet alone security, motivated enough to write their legislators, and the circuit will complete, and we will get poorly conceived legislation as a result of that, and that would be the worst of everything, in my opinion. So I think
Yeah, I'm on it. I'm with it.
I think the biggest challenge for us as a community is to try to come together on some of the big problems and actually make some big statements and big leaps forward. I think one of the challenges of that is that we're all really kind of esoteric, geeky, intelligent people that can barely agree with each other. So that is a not a small challenge, but I think it's doable nonetheless because a very loud, democratic, disagreeable argument amongst a bunch of really smart people usually ends up with a very interesting solution.
You know,
As long as you got a
I
little bit
want
of
to
structure to
pivot
bring it.
and talk about I don't know if it was a keynote, but it was a talk at RSA from the Palo Alto Network CEO that basically talked about that security isn't about technology, it's about trust. And I think just in that one statement, we could probably have a discussion about what that really means. I think that if we want to bring it back to technology in general in the Internet of Things, the trust versus security argument is pretty interesting, right? I think that a lot of people consumers especially, lower their trust in a product or technology just to acquire that technology. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, what's the carrot? I mean, why are they lowering their trust? It's because they want it so bad. It's got sexy features.
Convenience, Josh,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Yeah. I think operational convenience and glossies and stuff trump security just about every time.
Right. I want
I
to
would
trust
agree.
it because it's solving a problem for me or making something easier. So therefore, I'm lowering my level of trust in a certain technology in terms of security in order to get that convenience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Yep.
if you go back to identity proofing, right? You're talking about assurance levels and stuff relative to whatever it is you're trying to do. Uh, I think if you don't mind me stepping in to just kind of answer your broader part, right? I mean, Microsoft till they shut it down, they had a trustworthy computing group,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a fairly decent paper where they took a stab at defining trust. And a number of years ago in the college scenes, the school I went to was doing a lot to look at trust. And the thing that's fascinated me for the last 20 years is the interplay between trust in person and the trust online, and what we replicate with computers when it's more autonomous or somebody's not there. And so we're watching the evolution now, is to say, so what about things like wearables? What about what we call the Internet of Things? And what role does trust play? I think at that high level, yeah, I think that's good. Now, what's curious about it, by the way, is that because I just looked deeper into that link, and this feels sadly a little bit like a pitch for their product. I know that shocks everybody, but
Yeah. You know what, Michael? He's defining a problem, right?
yeah, no,
He's
and
saying,
it's fair.
yeah,
I think it's good that he's
and it
doing it.
is. Yeah.
His first call. I mean, I don't want to sidetrack us because I think the topic's more interesting. His first call is, well, we got to have better prevention, including next generation technologies. Oh,
Oh, and
okay.
they make a next
Yeah,
generation
that's odd. That's
firewall.
really
Yeah,
odd.
That's a
interesting.
bit of
So
a not a bit of it. It's a lot of a generalization,
But see,
right?
like trust to me isn't always about prevention, right? So I think we look at it offline. If you don't mind a quick plug, then, because we already talked about InfoSec World, what we're opening the leadership conference with, what the CIOs and CISOs that we've been working with have told us is, our biggest challenge, Michael, is trust. They need to trust us. We need to trust. How do we build trust? By the way, they're not talking about this from a technology perspective. So the reason I'm bringing it up is I think it's really interesting. I
Mm,
mean, how do we learn to trust people?
mm.
How do we learn to trust people that we've never met? I mean, if
Well,
guys,
I think it's interesting, Michael. You say people are almost more inclined to trust technology. I trust my smartphone because I want to do things with my smartphone. So I'm
yeah.
trusting my smartphone. But when an interesting angle to that, Michael, is when security people come to me and they say, well, that's bad. You shouldn't trust your smartphone. Well, how much trust do I have in that security person? Where's my
How
level
many
of trust
times?
here?
How many times too have we been any place in society and the person says, "Well, that's not what the computer says." But
the,
it's
the
Mike,
internet told me
open
it's
your
true.
eyes. Yeah.
The
yeah, but
internet told me antifreeze is the same color as Gatorade, so therefore I
We
should
got it,
drink
son.
it and it would be good for me.
I'm curious in the discussion at the CISO level where the trust boundary is the biggest problem too, because there's multiple facets to that. I mean, it's not, it's a trust boundary between, them and their constituents they're trying to protect, them and their customers, them and maybe consultants. There's all kinds of boundaries there that you
In
can
the
define.
executive suite and the board.
Yeah. And I wasn't even thinking up the chain like you just mentioned. So there's a lot of boundaries there, and there's a lot of different facets of that discussion that are very interesting area to explore from the sociological kind of perspective.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We'll talk about it at the CISO level or even at the consumer level and everywhere in between. When I
Right.
adopt a new technology, and it does friggin' fabulous things for me as a consumer, right? You've heard people talk, oh, I got this new widget, and this thing is awesome because it does fabulous things for me. And then you talk to the CISO, well, we did this project and we implemented this technology. It saved us millions of dollars and it's fabulous. They inherently want to trust that technology, and they're trusting it. Why? Most likely because nothing bad has happened yet. Yet is the
Well,
key
And,
fact, right?
and that's the
Nothing bad.
problem.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Trust is subjective.
Yep.
Trust is a way you feel about something.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way for you to quantify trust. So when I go to and I'm a techie, I'm binary, I'm 1-0. When people talk to me about trust, the first thing that comes to me, cool feelings, I can exploit that.
Yes.
Thinking kind of like a social engineer.
Yes.
Typically, what I'd like to go with customers is risk. Let's see, what are the risks here? Let's quantify those. That is something I can see. That is something I can measure. That is something that I can brainstorm with the team, and we can look at the different variances of it, and that's something that then I can mitigate. When people talk to me about trust, that all of a sudden my conversation with that CIO, CISO, whoever, changes into I have to social engineer this person. I have to deal with their emotions and how do they see this brand, how do they see this product, how will it impact them, how will it make them look. So when I have those trust conversations, it is mostly me manipulating how that person feels about X, rather than dealing with the original problems of what X entails.
And we, I think, as security people, instill this distrust. And I think a great example of that is I designed a wireless network, and I designed the security specifically in the wireless network. And to talk about how trust plays into that, I didn't trust the air, right? And this was in a large campus in a urban area where there's lots of different people and organizations. And I said, inherently, I don't trust the air. So therefore, there's going to be this level of security. Well, what happened was I tried to instill a distrust for the users. I tried to tell the users, you shouldn't really trust the wireless network. And that's something that I think as security professionals, when we talk about wireless, we say all the time, like, don't trust the wireless network. But what happened was that made it inconvenient.
Yep.
After I left, they started taking out the security, right? Because we want people to use it and be more convenient. And hey, when we took out that security, we didn't see anything bad happen. Now, I'm not saying nothing bad happened. I'm saying they didn't see anything bad happen. The organization, the users, they didn't see anything bad happen. So they started to build up more trust in that wireless network with their users, making it more convenient, but therefore decreasing the security. Is that the right decision? I'm not sure.
No, but there's a point of no return, right? If you carry that out to its logical conclusion, it's like you're slowly creeping up to the edge of the cliff, and then eventually, and it happens to a lot of people, they'll fall right off the cliff.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and
but they're not going to realize that they've misplaced that trust until they fall off.
Until something bad happens, like falling off the cliff, or the wireless network is just completely open, non-encrypted, and then all of a sudden people are like, well, my banking credentials are getting stolen, and my other, my credentials to this system are getting stolen, and people are hijacking, and then now bad things are happening.
Right.
This is where one of the things that I've always been fascinated by is that when we go look at the protocols that were developed in the 70s, when it was still ARPA and DARPANET, and it was never going to be the internet. I mean,
it was implied trust
together. Well, so if you look at and if you look at the way they designed them, you talk to most of those protocol developers, and they're like, if I had known then what I know now, I wouldn't have done it this way. And so the question I always like to ask people is, okay, are we learning anything from it? And we are starting to see not just protocols. I'm actually really encouraged. A lot of the briefings I've taken this year are companies that are showing me that they have platforms, true platforms, and that they're upgrading the platforms, and that there's a modularity to it, and that you can bolt on, or not bolt on, that's probably the wrong way to say it. You can select that what you need when you need it in order to get where you want. And I like that because, what I keep thinking about is that I do think we tend to invest trust in something, and as long as nothing goes wrong, we continue to keep that trust, right? That's that whole it's hard to earn, it's easy to lose thing. But I'm not sure that the flip side of that always means then, well, I mean, we're kind of screwed. I mean, we see situations where that does, and when we create stuff on binary, right? I mean, I just saw on Twitter again today somebody complaining about there's still people using Windows XP. guys, there's still people using Windows 95. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why we're worried about. I mean, okay, we can be worried about all of it. So the question is that when we design these things, when we ask these questions now, right? What's your upgrade path? What modularity can you put in it? What options do I have for higher security? And I think we're seeing more of that come into it. And I think that's actually the right way to go, right? It's layering this type of stuff. And I think that if we can encourage more of that, and that's why I always wanted to distill down the questions, and that's look, I'll be really upfront. We're gonna do this like in a month. Oh, a month from today, we're gonna do this on trust. I've got a whole stack of papers, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what to put together around it. So if somebody's got ideas or questions or models, shoot it to me. I mean, I could tell you this: we're not doing a trust fall because I think that's useless.
Oh, you mean when you
But
carry my bags? Can't we come
no,
back to
no,
my
your
room
bags.
and do some trust falls?
Yeah, you go first. We'll play Ask Grabby Grabby.
Is that like a Quaalude?
Yeah. When I play it, there's no pants. No pants. Trust falls.
Plus, there's a big barrel of lube in the room with him.
I travel with this 55-gallon drum. So-
I didn't carry your luggage. Maybe you should have asked what's going to be in your luggage, Paul.
I want to talk about two technologies that we flirt with a little bit. One is privileged identity management, right?
Yeah.
Which lets you manage the trust between your systems or the trust between different data stores even. And then there's two-factor authentication, which I think helps. And I think it helps more that the server trusts the client in that example, but I think it can also help instill some trust with the connection from the client to the server, so that me as the user, I have a little more trust, right, in Google services when I enable two-factor authentication, or my bank services when if I log in, they're sending me a text message to my phone or something. So even basic two-factor authentication, and those are two technologies that I think I want to explore more on the show.
Good.
I think they're important technologies that we haven't covered as much as they should. I think there's some great companies that are offering solutions in those areas, and that's kind of where some of the content's headed.
I think it makes sense. Let me just throw something out then for people to think about too. Identity proofing. There's a level that you proof at. We used to joke. I mean, this is not a new joke, but it's not even really a good joke. But you can still go get a certificate today to protect your web server that's signed by some root CA someplace that cost you nothing, or you can get one that costs you $5. That doesn't mean necessarily you trust it, right? That just means they were willing to generate a cert for you and slap a signature on it. So the thing is, if
That's
you
good.
want
I thought you were going to tell the Canadian encryption joke, and I was going to have to put the kibosh on that.
No, I was just pointing out that so like when we talk about MFA or we talk about these other types of things, they're great. But it's kind of like every time I see people bitch about passwords, I always say, right, but there's three parts to it. There's the way you've designed and implemented the system. There's the way you maintain it. And then there's the people that are actually selecting and using passwords. We don't see people getting their individual passwords picked off very often anymore. It's almost they're going after the stores, or they're breaking out a weakness in it. So I think we should look at MFA. I think we should look at this, and I think it's fun. These are topics I think are really interesting, and I think that we're seeing the cloud is actually starting to create the capacity for people to look at it differently. And there are people we know that have been doing this for 15, 20 years, and they're finally starting to go, it's changing. There's opportunities. But
Hey,
I'm optimistic.
I'm gonna take exception to one thing. There is people going for online attacks against individual passwords still, because there's ways to do it.
All right.
Yeah,
they don't tend to make the news as often. You're right. I don't mean to simplify it down to it's not happening. I just don't.
Yeah, in fact, it's a very effective attack technique these days. But anyway, that's a whole other topic.
Let's talk about attack techniques, Jeff. Since some of my stories kind of fall into some categories, and we've talked like very high level security throughout most of the show. So I want to make sure we bring some of that. I almost feel like we needed a technical segment in this show to bring it back to tech, and I hope to do more of those. If you have suggestions as to technical segments that you would like to see on the show, please send them to psw@securityweekly.com. We will do our best to get that information out there. But two really technical projects that I found on GitHub. One is a firmware analysis tool. And I don't know what this is written in. I just found it today. I definitely want to play around with it. Everyone knows my love for embedded devices and things like that. And this is a project that I've wanted to write. Like, I've talked about wanting to do this, wanting to write this, and even like prototype some stuff. But this is an automated and scalable system for performing emulation and dynamic analysis of Linux-based embedded firmware. Awesome.
Nice.
So glad that someone has published this. I haven't played around with it. The project is called Firmidine. I'm going to say Firmidine is how I'm going
That
to
sounds
pronounce
right.
it. Yeah, it's in the show notes for this episode, wiki.securityweekly.com, episode 454. So I thought that was really cool. I'm really glad to see that someone took that on. Dude, this is not easy stuff, man. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we haven't implemented it yet, because there's a whole ton of engineering that goes into this, and it looks really good. So thank you for that. I'm sorry, I don't have the person's name who posted it, but hopefully the link to their GitHub will get some attention. The other thing is Affit YSEC Easy Wave. These are tools for evaluating and exploiting Z-Wave networks using software-defined radios. I'm sure it's not the only project of its type. However, I think it's really awesome to, when I think about the locks in my house, giving the command over Z-Wave to drop shields to all the locks in my house, I think that's a really cool hack. Right now, I'm kind of accepting whatever risk comes along with that. And you better hope I'm not home, because I'm armed if I am home. So, but I think that's a really cool hack, and I think tools like this that allow you to exploit Z-Wave, and that's just not locks in your house. Z-Wave uses all kinds of things, obviously, that we've talked about on the show. So that was really cool as well. That link is in the show notes.
Nice.
Another really cool technical thing is Carnal Ownage, which is Chris Gates, posted some information about, like, if you're going to qualify for the CCDC, like the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition, and this is a sheer hacking challenge. And I always found it interesting, as I've been involved with these in the past, is how different it is when you do this kind of capture the flag hacking challenge environment where someone's sitting behind the keyboard, actively monitoring for your intrusions. They know you're trying to break in. It's really a great way to hone your skills. And it's really interesting how this differs from your traditional penetration test. And some of the scripts they have in there are like automatically deploying PSExec payloads and automatically executing post-exploitation, which, Carlos, I know you've been involved with in the past quite a bit. It was really cool to see some of these scripts. I don't know if this plays into a penetration test. It might. It'd be interesting to see if you were to use some of these techniques that are just automating the snot out of exploitation and post-exploitation, which is essentially what you're doing. If you're doing that, how easily or not so easily you're detected in that environment. So that was a really...
It all depends on scale also. If you're doing a pen test and you're only hitting one, and you only have one shell, 2, 3 shells, at that scale, you don't need so much automation.
Right.
Once you're able to, let's say, do a phishing campaign, and all of a sudden you have 20, 30 of those, and you have been able to move laterally in their network once you have determined their level of maturity, where you go like, cool, I don't see Windows 7 forwarding, I don't see Splunk, I don't see log correlation engine, I don't see jack shit. They're not moving their logs. Cool. This means I can move laterally a bit more freely. And then you start moving laterally and you can start getting more shells. Now all of a sudden you're going like, damn, now I need to collect even more information so I can get my situational awareness in this environment. Now I really need automation to gather all this data and sort through the noise and sort through the crap, so those nuggets that are critical for me come out. So it all depends at the scale and what you're looking for, and also the level of maturity of your opponent, because the higher the level of maturity of your opponent, depending on the controls that he has implemented, the more careful you have to be with automation, because you can shoot yourself in the foot.
Absolutely. No, I agree, Carlos. On the ransomware trend, we're seeing a huge trend in ransomware. We've talked about this on previous episodes recently. They're now targeting WordPress sites. I can totally see this. If your website is of any value to you, right? And WordPress, as we know, is a pretty low-hanging target. It takes a lot of work to secure a WordPress site. They're getting hit with ransomware.
That's rather cool.
Yeah. I mean, it was just really an evolution of that attack, right? Like, why deface it when you can, if you can progress your technology as an attacker and ransomware the site? Like, that's so much better, and it shows how attackers have really just continued the trend over the years of monetizing ransomware that and get some money out of it. And I think that's really scary, but interesting.
They innovate. We can learn
They
from
do.
them.
Well, I think
Go ahead,
one of
Jeff.
the interesting things is on the ransomware is that it's working, right? I mean, there are
Mhm.
people paying
Paying it.
the ransoms, and that's a very sad state of affairs. But you could see if somebody was in a situation where they've got a lot of systems tied up with ransomware on it, and they don't feel like they have any other exit.
Mhm.
You can see how they would go down that route
Absolutely.
and pay the ransom. So
Well, keep in mind too, when I started looking into it, this is the part that shocked me is that they've really perfected the systems. I mean, these things run like world class services now, and they've really worked on the pricing models too, so that look, if you've been following what we would typically call good hygiene, right? Because look, if everything's a basic, nothing's basic. If it's all foundational, nothing's foundational. But good backups, that's kind of a basics. And but if you think about it, the number of people who routinely and regularly back up and test their WordPress site. In fact, if you've ever had to migrate a WordPress site, it never works the way you expect it to. So the fact that you have a backup, maybe congratulations. So they've priced this now so that you're paying. You're just easier to pay than it is to do anything else.
it's
Two technologies, like sheer technology stories, I don't know how much they relate to security, but one was an article about how tablets are dead after 6 years, how that there's not a lot of innovation today into tablets because you can get tablets for essentially free or next to free, right? A monthly charge, a carrier will give you a tablet for free. You can get them for, $50, $100, $200. At $200, at $200, you're getting a pretty awesome tablet, and there's not that much difference in features from anything that costs more than $200 was the point of the article, and I tend to agree. So I thought that was interesting how Apple made a ton of money by, basically establishing the tablet, and now they're just like a commodity kind of thing, and there's not too much innovation in that space. Samsung is also now shipping a 15.36 terabyte SSD, and it's called the world's largest capacity solid-state drive to show you where storage is going in terms of
wow.
technology.
That's
which I thought was
really
kind of interesting.
Yeah,
It's interesting when you talk about that too. Do you guys any follow Backblaze? Backblaze does like a annual report now of drive and drive stability. The big takeaway from this year is people are getting better. And then Google came out and said, "Hey, here's what we would like you guys to develop for our data centers." And yeah, it would kind of suck for the drives, but it would be better for data stability. So it's kind of fascinating how we keep changing and expanding. And it's one of those things when you think to yourself, well, is there a difference on the drive? The answer is actually, yeah. Changing.
Yeah, so interesting technology things. I want to thank our illustrious panel, of course, for rounding out the security news. Thanks to all of our good friends at InGuardians for helping us out in our previous segment where we tried to hone them in on one specific solution, but we covered a lot of ground in that segment. But I think our listeners are really going to appreciate that, of course. Some great insights from the very smart folks in InGuardian. So thanks, everyone, for watching, and we'll see everyone next week on Security Weekly. Over and out.
You have to say, now we dance.
Now we dance.